What is up, NBA fans? I am Jason Burgos for Sportsnaut.com, and I have the pleasure of being joined by an outstanding reporter of the NBA. He's previously worked for NBA.com, USA Today, LA Times, and is now serves as an insider for Sportsnaut. He is here to talk about the fallout of the first weekend of NBA free agency, and that is the one and only Mark Medina. Senor Medina! Thanks for joining me to talk NBA free agency.
Jason, thanks for the nice shout out. A lot of fun storylines to get into at this NBA free agency, which I guess is fitting for every NBA free agency period.
Yeah, and this one was better than I think expected, because it seemed like maybe it'll be a weaker than expected, but there was like surprises but not surprises. I mean, we'll get into a lot of them right now, though, because the first one I had to talk about. So heading into the weekend, there was talk about, and I even wrote about it for Sportsnaut, the Lakers might take a poison pill contract with Austin Reeves if someone offered him a big $100 million kind of max deal. That actually didn't happen, but instead the Rockets gave Fred VanVleet $130 million deal over 3 years. In your winners and losers piece for Sportsnaut, giving a little advertisement there, Fred was one of your winners for obvious reasons. $130 million is
Yeah, he got the bag.
Exactly. That's winning at the highest level. But my question to you is, are the Rockets losers in that deal, or is there a solid case to be made for giving $130 million, $40+ million a year to a guy that's only been an all-star once? Is there a case to be made? Yes, he's deserving. They didn't take a poison pill. That's a good deal for them.
Yeah, I think if you're a championship contending team, you would be a loser for that kind of deal. No disrespect for Fred VanVleet, but just in terms of managing your resources. But when you're a team that's young, rebuilding, sometimes you got to overpay to get the right players in the mix. And I think with Fred VanVleet, he's a proven player. He came from being undrafted to being an all-star player, being a part of a championship team. And he very much has even more value at the Houston Rockets because they're a young team that needs some babysitting. They need some accountability, need some lead by example with how he plays the game, how he trains, etc. So I think that, no doubt the Rockets are better because of his skill set. That's a reason why the Raptors were hoping that they could retain him. But his value is enhanced even more because of the kind of team that they're at. So maybe that goes into why that contract was the way it was.
The Rockets also signed Dillon Brooks the next day. Now, VanVleet and Brooks are good players, no doubt about it. Will improve them. They're going to be better because of them. But after 3 years as a lottery team, I'm not sure they necessarily are guaranteed, oh, yeah, those guys make them a playoff team. And that's the goal. This is what the whole build-up for this offseason was for them. That's why they were talking about possibly going after Harden for Houston. Considering they had the most cap space this summer, do you feel have they done a good job so far? Did they maybe just make the best of a situation because it wasn't a super strong free agent market? Did they maybe reach, like we talked about a little bit? Did they aim, and maybe they should have kind of been patient, waited for a trade and a big star like Damian Lillard or something like that? Or this kind of offseason is still to be determined. Still too early to say, and we have to just kind of wait and see what they make the most of it.
I think the point that you hit on, the making the best of the situation, that's the most apt description to describe how to evaluate the Houston Rockets. First, they made the right decision. You know what? As much as this was a real possibility that James Harden reunites with the Rockets, they decide ultimately, you know what? Let's not go down that path. There's going to be more turbulence than positivity because of the fact that James Harden's days are best behind him because of his age and his struggles with his durability. I think also locker room dynamic, even if they would inevitably become a better offensive shooting team and scoring team, that he would kind of take away a little bit of the shine of the individual players, the young guys. And he's not kind of this beacon of, hey, here's a vet that you want to follow necessarily. No doubt his talent's there, but he's not the ultimate example that teams pinpoint of, oh, this is how you should work and train, etc. So I think that was a victory in and of itself. And then I think they made the best of the circumstances. I think that Fred VanVleet signing was great. Dillon Brooks, I think, was good from a basketball standpoint. He's a good defender. I think it is ironic, though, that he's not going to be considered this, veteran in the locker room that spouts a lot of wisdom, right? He has done a lot of on-court shenanigans. He got himself an unnecessary trash talking with LeBron James during the playoffs that basically woke up a sleeping giant. But I do think from a basketball standpoint, it's good. But to your big picture evaluation, look, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs next season, but I think they're at least going to lay down the foundation where they have a good combination of good veterans around them, some young guys they can continue to develop, and Ime Udoka as head coach. Look, there's a lot of things that explain why the Boston Celtics parted ways with him, but when you're looking at it through simply a basketball lens, he's been proven that he can get the best out of a roster. He can hone in defensively and also hold players accountable, whether they're established players or young players. So I think that next season it'll be about kind of laying down that good foundation. Then maybe the following season, I think that we can actually start talking about them becoming a playoff team.
I come from a time watching basketball where it's just such a different game, and it was a post game. You had the big centers, and we've kind of completely gone away from that, and kind of gone away from like the value of a traditional kind of point guard and stuff like that. And you make such great, excellent points in terms, especially for Harden. Yeah, I get the idea of bringing in Harden. He's a superstar. He's an impact player on that level. But how does it affect, say, a Jalen Green and those kind of players? Like, you've been around the sport for a long time, talked to a lot of people. Is there value? Is there, like, I spoke with Nick Friedel last week and was suggesting, could VanVleet be like the Jalen Brunson of this NBA free agency? And while I say he couldn't be, and he's not going to be as impactful as Brunson, who was fantastic, could he be impactful as a traditional point guard, kind of just making life easier for the very good lottery talent that Houston has, and making those guys finally push them to the level that they hope for with being lottery picks? Can a guy like him as a point guard do that in like that kind of old school way?
Yeah, I think 100%. I mean, when you look at how Fred VanVleet's gotten to this point in the NBA, he started from nothing and turned it into something. And so he's put in the work. He's also overachieved. And so while I do think that there's some differences with him and Jalen Brunson, where at the time when Jalen Brunson went to the Knicks, it was, well, are you going to commit to that much amount of money to a guy that's not a number one guy on the team? I think Fred VanVleet's already established himself in some respects of being an all-star, maybe not always being the definitive guy on the Raptors, but, being a de facto leader and knowing how to mesh well. And so I think that he's already been a step ahead of Brunson, so to speak. But I think moving forward, does that mean that he's going to be this ultimate franchise player that gets back on the All-Star team? I think he could get back on the All-Star team. Being a franchise player, who knows? But I think the more important quality is what you outlined about what his impact will be on winning. And what that will be is not just the impact that he has as a player, but the impact on making sure that the Rockets' young players are playing the right way. The MO around the Rockets last season is that they were a bunch of young players that were just trying to get their numbers. And it's not to say they're bad guys or it was a toxic locker room environment. It was just the reality that they're on a losing team and they're not trying to play to win games. They're trying to play to pad up their stats and secure their future moving forward. And I think Fred VanVleet will provide an instant speed bump and probably even stop sign to some of that nonsense. And I think in fairness to the Rockets young guys, they'll be more inclined to follow that because they'll respect Fred VanVleet, but they'll also be part of a much more winning environment with a roster that will have a better chance to actually win games.
Now let's talk about a team that was a winning team. And this is not something you always hear with the Lakers. It's sort of like the Knicks in a certain way, but just smart, not big splash moves. And since February, Rob Pelinka's kind of been on fire. Like, he had a good trade deadline. He's had a pretty good free agency. Yes, not big splashes, but brings back D'Angelo Russell. Yeah, there's issues with that. He's maybe not the perfect guy. Brings back Austin Reeves. Austin Reeves didn't get the big poison pill. Solid deal. Overall, and Gabe Vincent, another nice ad, fits in with that team, now a defensive-minded team. It's just smart moves. And, the Knicks are making smart moves, too. It's a weird world we're in. They're actually good, and they're making smart moves. But, the Lakers, what do you think of their moves on that first night or two? And what would your grade, how big of a winner? Because they got to be a winner.
Yeah, Jason, I think you hit it out of the park as far as what you were saying about the Lakers. That they didn't make any splash moves. There was a lot of incremental changes. But I think even with that, I think that, as of the first the few days of free agency, they've won the free agency sweepstakes. Now, there is a caveat. It just started. Even though these guys aren't free agents, you could obviously make the argument that whoever gets Damian Lillard or James Harden to a lesser extent will win the offseason sweepstakes, depending on what they give back. But all those caveats aside, when we're looking at strictly free agent moves, I think the Lakers did all the right things. They didn't need to get a third star because they already have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And when they did get a third star with Russell Westbrook, that became a hot mess, not just because of Russell Westbrook's poor fit, but I think the larger part was, they had a lot of injuries across the board, most notably to LeBron and AD, but they also had a lack of supporting cast that could accentuate Russ's strengths and shield his weaknesses. And so it's good that the Lakers resisted any temptation of, going after Kyrie Irving or really any other star, because that would have made them have to sacrifice all of their depth. And so here, they didn't reinvent the wheel, but they made a really good calculated decision of retaining Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura and being proactive of kind of scaring teams away from giving them what you were saying, that poison pill. I think it was very intentional that several NBA reporters, including myself, got word that the Lakers had full intentions of matching Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura, because that may have inhibited teams from going down that road because of the rules of the salary cap. If you're giving an offer sheet, all of a sudden, all that money is tied up in the short term until that other team matches. And because of that, teams would probably be prohibited from making other major moves. And so while Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura, they're valuable players to the Lakers, they're probably not valuable enough to other teams to just tie up their cap space without being able to do anything. So I think that was very important, because you're not just evaluating other good role players. It's about what it means for LeBron James' championship window. And basically, they had a lot of great chemistry. They complemented him really well. And they also made life easier for Anthony Davis. With D'Angelo Russell, we know his strengths and weaknesses. He was a great playmaker. He disappeared in the playoffs, had an inconsistent shot. But I think the Lakers, they felt like as long as the price was right, they would retain him, because they had the big picture lens that as much as these trade deadline moves, they were a multitude of a lot of different pieces. He was really the main ingredient that made sure that the offense really hummed nicely, and that there was a lot of good floor spacing, a lot of good chemistry with LeBron and AD. And when you look at the replacements to offset Dennis Schroeder, I mean, Gabe Vincent, he was one of those undrafted players with Miami. He can hit a three. He can defend. Cam Reddish, he might not be a great three-point shooter, but he has a lot of positional versatility as a defender. Teron Prince, he can hit the three. He can defend multiple spots, big and small. And Jackson Hayes, he's a very competent backup center with a lot of athleticism. So when you look at what the Lakers' priorities were of retaining some of their guys, adding some more backcourt depth, and adding some more front court depth as a backup center, they hit all the buttons you need. And so what all that means, I still look at the Denver Nuggets as the championship favorite, but they did get a little bit worse, losing Bruce Brown, losing Jeff Green. And I think the Lakers closed the gap that they're at least in second place. And, once the playoffs start, anything can happen. So it should be I think, a fun rematch in the Western Conference Finals.
And to add to your point about the Austin Reeves stuff, and I did a story on it on Sportsnaut. Shout out to Sportsnaut. It's genius stuff. They were going to wait till July 6th and hold that team up and not allow them to make any moves. And you're welcome, Lakers, because I did that story, got out there, and you're welcome. And all the other writers, you're welcome, Lakers. But moving on, also shout out, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like, share, subscribe. Let us know what your thoughts are. Who's the winners and losers in NBA free agency so far for you? Please let us know, comment and like, all that kind of stuff. But going to the Mavericks, you had them as a loser, signing and Kyrie Irving, totally understandable. Away from the signing, because they had to do it. We all figured that was probably going to happen. Can you make any case to give Mavericks fans hope? Why is this team going to actually somehow be a lot better with the same coach, same kind of team, when Kyrie and Luka just weren't that great when they were on the floor together? Can you make the case to give Mavericks fans some hope?
Well, I think I can make the case that I can incrementally be better, maybe even be a playoff team. But I think when you're when I was criticizing them re-signing Kyrie Irving, especially at the price that they did, it's not so much that they did that. It's more of the circumstances
Yeah.
that forced them to do that with
Yeah.
acquiring Kyrie Irving in the first place. And so I think that the fact that they retained Dwight Powell, they got Seth Curry, Dante Exum, and maybe they package some of the players that are already on their roster with Reggie Bullock, Maxi Kleber, Tim Hardaway, JaVale McGee, Rashawn Holmes into some kind of trade package. But I would just caution, what is that trade package ultimately going to yield? I don't think it's going to land them another star player. It might be better rotational players. But I think that even with that, there is a pathway for success if that trade gets them more of a defensive identity. Because I think in fairness to Kyrie, for all his shenanigans that he pulled in Brooklyn and Boston and Cleveland at the end, he was considered a positive locker room presence. And while the chemistry with Luka and Kyrie can improve, it's not going to fundamentally change things if they don't have enough of a supporting cast around them and they don't have enough good defenders. So realistically, they could get some role players that could patch things up enough for them to be respectable. But if I had to guess, their ceiling is middle of the pack at best and barely making the play-in tournament or missing the play-in tournament at worst.
Sorry, Mavericks fans. Honest truth, that's what's going to happen. But now, moving on from a team that was a big story, and I feel they were a big story for a minute, and they kind of crapped the bed a little bit. The Sacramento Kings, big story on draft night. They make this trade. They make this space. Like, oh, whoa, okay, you're now $30 million on the cap. Oh, maybe they'll target somebody. Maybe they'll add a star. Okay, they're going to take another step forward. And instead, they kind of just go get Harrison Barnes. Understandable. I'm not saying Harrison Barnes is a bad player. He's been good for them. He does various roles. But like that opportunity to maybe you get a Kyle Kuzma or something like that, or maybe make a trade and use that money and all those kind of scenarios that they can come up with. Like, what are your thoughts? Are they losers in free agency? Are they winners? Are they somewhere in the middle by maybe not making the most of this cap space and this kind of positive momentum they have going forward? What do you think of the Kings' decision is go with Harrison Barnes?
Yeah, I'm not going to say the Kings were winners, but I'm also not going to say the Kings were losers. I mean, look, I think it's good that they kept Domantas Sabonis. Maybe the 5-year, $217 million extension is a pretty hefty price for him, but he's a valuable player for them. Harrison Barnes, he's not the splashiest wing option, on the market. You mentioned Kyle Kuzma. But I think the reason why they decided to choose Harrison Barnes is he's an 82-game player. He's steady. Yeah. And I think that the Kings felt like, let's really lean into the continuity. They still are a young team. And if you tap into that, they could even climb higher than they were last season with being third in the West. Now, I do say this is no disrespect to Sacramento, but it's just the landscape. Some of their playoff finish last year, not their finish, they lost in the first round, but their standings finish partly had to do with some teams that were supposed to be contenders just having a lot of injuries, where you have the Phoenix Suns, you have the Lakers, you have the Clippers. So maybe they do take a step back, but I think their best pathway for success is modeling what the Denver Nuggets were doing, about building around Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox and just trying to have as much continuity as you can, because if you're going to try to make all these splashy moves and try to integrate players, maybe it disrupts things. Kyle Kuzma, for example, he's a great player, but he's considered, a guy that gets a lot of numbers. He does have a lot of two-way capabilities, but I think that they viewed Harrison Barnes as a guy that has a lot better chemistry with the current group because he's been there for a while, and he's seen as a guy that you're not going to have to worry about how much he scores or draw plays for him. He's just a key cog in the system that can make sure everything else runs smoothly. So, they're not going to get necessarily kudos for, any free agency moves they get, but I want to put them in the loser category.
I'll do it. Losers and winners, Kings. I'm sorry, Kings fans, but you had a great season.
Participation trophy.
There you go. Good job, Kings. Good job. Now, because we're talking about Kuzma, maybe I'm overreaching here a little bit. I feel like I feel like the Washington Wizards are doing something right, and that's another one. Like to hear this, the Washington Wizards are doing the right things. They have a lot of change in the front office. Last season they had Beal, they had Porzingis, they had Kuzma, and it didn't work out for them. But they move off of Porzingis, they move off of Bradley Beal's massive contract and all the perils of that. They have a Tyus Jones. They have Jordan Poole. They have some other assets like a Danilo Gallinari on the bench. Re-sign Kuzma. Are they maybe winners in that re-signing Kuzma? He had the most upside maybe of those 3 stars they had last year. They got these other nice pieces. They have these nice things going on. They drafted Wembayamba's a teammate from that has a lot of potential and stuff like that. Are they winners with that signing? And also in general on the offseason, are the Wizards like under the radar winners so far this offseason?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, look, we gave them a lot of attention for what they didn't get back in the Bradley Beal situation, but you have to look at it through this lens. Bradley Beal had a no trade clause. There are only so many teams they could do, and while the Wizards weren't obligated to trade Bradley Beal, I think that because, especially it's a new front office that has security, they can kind of restart things. I think they made the conclusion we got to just hit the reset button. And so when you look at what else they got with all their other moves, it's been A pluses across the board. Now maybe there's some confusion if you're not going to keep Bradley Beal and if you're not going to keep Kristaps Porzingis, why would you keep Kyle Kuzma? But I would also make the argument that you can't just tear everything down to the studs. Then all of a sudden you just have a bunch of random players. Number 2, when you look specifically at a guy like Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma, they get buckets, right?
Yes.
And whether that leads to winning basketball or not, we'll see. But at the very worst, that can inflate a market value for trades leading into the trade deadline next summer. So I wouldn't look at it as, the Wizards are handing Kyle Kuzma the keys or Jordan Poole the keys and they're running the show. It's more of, hey, you'll make sure that we keep the lights on and off every game and compete and get numbers. And maybe that's when they make their next big move with those guys or one of those guys before the trade deadline next season.
Yeah, I mean, credit to them. They're off to a really good start, and all those moves are interesting. Now, continue on the last 2 questions on free agency and stuff like that. Is there a winner and loser in free agency, be it a player, be it a team, maybe that we haven't talked about, that maybe hasn't gotten enough credit from your point of view so far, winner, loser, or something like that?
I can't think of anything in particular, only because, I would say this. The Miami Heat, they're either going to be a winner or a loser, right? Because they cleared cap space to try to get in the Damian Lillard sweepstakes. And that may or may not happen. Damian Lillard wants to be there, but Portland's made it clear, from what I've gathered, that they're comfortable having to play this out in the long term. If they don't feel like they're getting a deal that's good enough, that they would still be considered a viable playoff contender. And so if the Heat miss out on Damian Lillard, they're going to be a loser because they haven't really done anything left. They let Gabe Vincent go. They let Max Strus go. And it was very clear that as much as they deserve all the accolades for being the only second team to get to the NBA Finals in league history, it was very clear that that wasn't a sustainable model to replicate next season. That it only had so much of a ceiling. And so you do laud the Heat for not being afraid to take that risk. But from a basketball standpoint, if they miss out on Damian Lillard, they're going to take a lot of steps back next season. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out.
Now, before we get to this final question, of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like, share, subscribe. Let us know, again, your winners and losers. Any moves you feel really stand out, terrible moves, please let us know in the comments. Final question. Pretty much all the top free agents were actually signed over the weekend. It was like, man, there was no, let's go on a tour, let's have everybody kiss our butt and tell me how great I am. There was none of that. Everybody really signed. There's a lot of people that just re-signed with the teams they were. VanVleet stood out so much because, one, he got a max deal, and 2, he was one of the few that left their team. Is there any players, any meaningful free agents left for teams out there, fans of teams that their teams didn't make a big move or notable move that they're hoping for something? Is there Anybody meaningful in your opinion, like still left out there? I mean, such a weak market. I mean, the only ones that really stand out for me, like Christian Wood or Grant Williams, is there, or pretty much all the best ones are off the board. Second, third tier guys.
Yeah, like Christian Wood, he's improved a lot this past season with Dallas. Now, under the guys, that depends what dollar figure you're giving, but what he brings to the table, he's shown that he can elevate his defense well and he can be a part of a winning team. That was kind of the knock on him when he was in Houston. With Grant Williams, yeah, I think that he's probably top of the board. He's a really great defender. He can defend multiple spots. He's a pretty good scorer as well, but I think that there is this expectation that the Celtics are probably going to retain him because he's a restricted free agent. So if he does get any offers, they're probably going to match it. But so far, they haven't attended to that yet, and we haven't seen any teams giving him an offer sheet. The other player I would keep an eye on, I mean, he's not a game changer, but if you're looking at, nice players, Mason Plumlee, I think the feeling is the Clippers are going to keep him as a good backup center, but he's a really good, he's improved his shot. He's a good passer, really good defender, considered a really good team guy. And so, again, teams have already handled like the major dominoes. The only dominoes is what's going to happen with Damian Lillard and James Harden. But all the other signings is going to just be kind of moves that are on the fringes. So within that context, I would keep your eyes out on those three guys and what's next for them.